Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we're going to take a quick look at Mars in Leo from a personal perspective. So this will be what we can expect, what we should lean into during this time, what we should avoid. And we'll do a general overview for all of us, and then we will get into which house Mars is entering based on your rising sign. Before we dive into it, if you are new here, please do consider subscribing for future videos if you're interested in content like this, major transits as it relates to your personal chart, as well as political, social, cultural astrology. And if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, I would very much appreciate that. It helps me out with the algorithm. It helps the video to spread. So that is a very wonderful way to support the channel, and I very much appreciate that. So without any further introduction, let's dive into it. So what can we expect, generally speaking, with Mars entering Leo on November 4th? So for a couple of months, Mars is going to be in Leo. It'll go back and retrograde into Cancer again for about 4 more months. And then we'll have Mars in Leo again starting next year. And I'll, of course, cover that in future videos as it comes back around and point that out. But from the 4th of November through the 3rd of January, we have Mars in Leo. And this is a very different energy than what we've been dealing with recently with Mars in Cancer. For one thing, Mars very strongly prefers to be in Leo, and it's able to act in a much more natural way. What this Mars in Leo is encouraging is a great deal of confidence and courage. So self-assuredness, feeding your own comfort with yourself, your own confidence in yourself in a healthy way through self-love. Now, I should say that that does mean that people are going to be pursuing their own interests a little bit more, but it's going to be a lot more out in the open. So it should be still a much more straightforward period of time that we're entering with Mars and Leo. This also encourages a lot of bravery and boldness. So standing out, going after what you want with a lot of gumption, perhaps especially if you have a Mars that is not in a fire sign yourself. This can be a period of time where you show a great deal more boldness than usual. So that's something that we can proactively embrace during this period of time as well. So facing challenges fearlessly. Mars in Leo is not really going to back down from any sort of challenge. It's going to take it as a direct challenge, and it'll take a lot of pride in the fact that it's able to go after that. So if there's anything that you've been wanting to do but have been a little bit nervous about, this would be a really great time, especially if this has something to do with building yourself up. So working on that muscle memory of not being fearful of taking action and really putting your heart into things without anxiety around that. Now, additionally, this encourages us to express ourselves openly. So whatever it is that makes you unique, really embracing that and expressing that quite conspicuously without concern about how other people are going to react to it. And this can also encourage direct action toward your personal goals, your own ambitions, the things that you are wanting for yourself. It becomes very easy with Mars in Leo to really lean into that. Of course, we're going to look at this through the houses. Pardon if you can hear the pretty strong thunderstorm. The very last of Mars in Cancer is really playing out here. I'm recording this on the 3rd, so we've still got it in Cancer and it's coming through in storms. So it's a little bit loud. I'm hoping that that isn't catching too much, but yeah, so coming back to this, direct action toward personal goals and ambitions. So yeah, Mars and Leo. Mars is action and Leo is about self-assertion. It's about one's own personal ambitions and pursuing those really unapologetically. So that's something that we're really going to want to proactively undertake with the opportunity that this Mars and Leo is bringing to us. Now, additionally, we're all going to be receiving, to some extent, a boost in our own creativity and self-expression. So there's a drive with Mars as well. And in Leo, that is going to be to create. Leo is a very creative sign. I feel like this is something that gets a little bit overlooked with Leo. But there's a desire to infuse oneself into one's own expression, but also into relationships and work, but even into objects or works of art other forms of personal expression that are quite creative. This is one of the reasons why Leo is associated with actors and performers, because they're infusing their own personality and their own physical action into a specific creation. Like they themselves in a specific role are the creation. So this is something that this energy helps with a lot. It doesn't mean that it just applies to acting, but for any sort of self-expression, that's what this is going to encourage. And it's going to create a lot of drive toward that end. So this is a really ideal time for engaging in any sort of creative projects, in any sort of self-expression. And that also goes for parenting. So Leo, in my mind, is the quote unquote father, not to gender it, of the zodiac. It's very warm sign. It's very nurturing. It really wants to have a really great influence over things. So being really engaged with your children or the children that are around you enthusiastically, this is also something that's going to feed your energy. It'll feed their energy. There should just be a lot of really great feelings that are able to be shared and expressed between you and any other people, but certainly children, because of the fact that they are so open to engaging imaginatively, creatively, actively. It just really works with Leo energy. So this is really what Leo is all about. So infusing your own unique personality into your work and action. So really, again, any sort of action that you're taking, we tend to lean toward career and work as astrologers, just because these are such important areas of life to people. But really anything that you do, infusing that with your own unique stamp, making your mark on things, is something that is really wonderful as a way to express this Mars and Leo energy that we have available to us. Additionally, Mars in Leo is very passionate, it's very romantic, and this doesn't just have to be in terms of specifically romantic partnerships, although this would be a really great time for dating, but really across the board, all relationships, to engage in them in that kind of romantic, almost chivalrous kind of way. Mars and Leo is really excellent for that. So that you're going to have a lot of energy for just doing really kind things for people, engaging with people in a very warm and caring way. And if you feel the urge coming up to kind of celebrate the unique qualities of your partner, friends, family members, anyone, just kind of letting them know that you appreciate those unique qualities, that's something that is going to feel really good for people to hear throughout these coming months as well. And of course, this also feeds into the adventurous attitudes that tends to come with Mars and Leo as well. So Mars and Leo is really going to want to engage in activities that cause it to stand out. So any sort of really bold, fearless energy that gets you attention, that's something that Mars and Leo is going to really enjoy engaging in. And so any sort of adventures that you're able to engage in, that should be quite enjoyable during this period of time as well. Again, grand gestures and spontaneity in relationships. I'll say it again, it doesn't have to just be in romantic partnerships. This can be with friends, family, whoever. Showing a lot of warmth and heart in your relationships is just going to build them up and build up the level of energy that you're sharing with people throughout this period of time as well. And this also offers a great deal of charisma and excitement. So people will be feeling much more charismatic. But additionally, charisma is also something that is going to win you some attention during this period of time, much more so than usual. So leaning into that would definitely be advised. If you're able to charm people, that should just create a pleasant flow between you and others as well. We also have a lot of leadership energy that comes along with Mars and Leo as well. And of course, that is focused on wanting to stand out, wanting to be in the spotlight. So there's a lot of energy available for taking the lead. And of course, there are many reasons for wanting to do that. If you have some ambition and you have an opportunity to lead along those lines, such that you're able to prove yourself either to yourself or to others toward that end, then it would definitely be worth taking those opportunities. But additionally, for the sake of recognition. So wanting to be understood as unique, wanting to be understood for your contributions, and, wanting to be able to go home at night and take pride in that. There's also a very strong desire to shine, and certainly Mars in Leo would be driven to pursue any sort of quote unquote glow up kind of energies. So if that's something that you are seeking, this is, again, there's a lot of energy available for you to do that. If you're feeling like, I could really use a confidence boost, I could really use a quote unquote glow up, this would be a period of time to go after that and try to make that happen for yourself. And this is also great for pursuits that require that visibility and initiative, because that energy is available and is going to get a lot of attention, very likely very positive attention. And of course, it's not just that this is a great time to do this, but we also have energy available to us to do that. So one thing to keep an eye on with Mars and Leo, though, is that it can really increase the level of emotion that people feel. It can, again, bring up a lot of those passions for good, sometimes also for bad. And so there is some potential for conflicts, especially based on where this is falling within your chart. There is also a tendency toward pride and ego defenses and ego clashes with Mars in Leo. So just understand that both your own ego and that of others will be a little bit more sensitive. So to any extent that you're able to practice patience with people and also with yourself, and to not react if you feel like your ego is being challenged, that would be really excellent, because there's a much lower tolerance for criticism during this period of time as well, and people are more likely to react to criticism in a strong way. I do also want to point out, this is just generally speaking a much more active time than we've been experiencing recently. So the things for which you feel like maybe you haven't had the energy, you haven't had the motivation, this is going to make that fully available to us. So think back to the things that you've been putting off for the past couple of months, and definitely consider going after those during this period of time, because you're much more likely to seek the reward of knowing that you've accomplished something and the pride that you can take in that. It's much more likely to genuinely motivate you. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and take this through the houses. All right, so for Aries Rising, Mars and Leo is taking place in your 5th house. So this is doubling down on the passion and playfulness of Leo. So you're going to be both driven for this and have it quite available to you. So I would take it full advantage of that during this period of time. The 5th house is a really wonderful place to have much of any transit. And to have Mars there, it's definitely one of the better places that Mars can transit in our charts, and particularly when it's in Leo. So again, any sort of adventures that you're able to engage in, any sort of physical activity that you're able to engage in, this would be a really wonderful time to do that. Additionally, any sort of activity that you're able to take pride in. So if you have been putting off some kind of physical regimen or anything like that, this would be a really great time to get into that, because of the fact that you're much more likely, again, to be driven by the reward of pride and accomplishment. If that's something that you've been putting off or that you haven't been super motivated around, I would definitely, again, take advantage of this period of time to do that. But additionally, to pursue creative and expressive projects, kind of along similar lines, this is going to give you something to take a great deal of pride in and to utilize to boost your own sense of confidence. And that in itself can feed into your own sense of inspiration, as well as your own courage to take those steps, to express yourself openly, to not worry about what other people think, and to really motivate yourself much more just by what it is that you are wanting for yourself, what it is that you enjoy to do. Leaning into any of those activities is very likely to be highly enjoyable and highly motivating during this period of time. Now, romance can also be more exciting and spontaneous during this time if you're dating. This would be a very interesting time to be dating, though I do need to point out, it's Mars and Leo. It's not in its worst mood as Mars, but Mars is considered a malefic planet. So we do also want to consider the fact that we can run into people who may be a little bit aggressive with us, specifically in areas that are associated with the fifth house. So this would be gyms, theaters. When you're out engaging in all of these activities, there can definitely be a little bit of harsh feedback to your own expressive creative project. So if you're sharing them and someone doesn't react in quite the way that you would like, try to lean in on not caring and not worrying what they think. Definitely don't let that discourage you during this period of time as well. Additionally, if you are dating, this could bring in people who are, again, a little bit more aggressive than we would necessarily like. So that's something to keep in mind. But otherwise, it should be a very, very enjoyable transit for you, especially if you have children. You and them are much more likely to be highly active and highly engaged with each other during this period of time as well. But yeah, I think that's most of what I wanted to cover for you. It's just going to be a very energetic time for you, and it should be very, very enjoyable. So for Taurus Rising, we have a shift of focus, which is now directed toward your family and home. You have a lot more energy and proactive motivation to address anything with regard to your family or your home. So lots of energy to decorate. This is, of course, actually pretty nice to have during the holidays. There are definite drawbacks to this, but certainly in terms of any sort of decoration or renovation to your home, that's definitely going to be something that will motivate you quite strongly during the holiday season. And that will be, of course, to make your home feel more expressive, to feel more comfortable, to feel more luxurious, or like a place that you just really feel a great deal of pride within. There can, though, be an intensification of family dynamics. So do be mindful of assertiveness with your family as well as anyone who is in your home, because this can bring out a little bit more aggressiveness than we would necessarily like, and some ego concerns with regard to family. So if you are spending time more so with family than usual during the holiday season, certainly, then do just try and be mindful of that. It's going to be a stressful election season if you're in the States. Really everywhere in the world feels pretty polarized. So no matter where you are, that could definitely be something that would come up. I would try to avoid sensitive topics like that, because people are much more likely to take things personally during this period of time and then to react based on that. But yeah, all of this energy and motivation that you have around your home, it would be a really wonderful time to get done anything that you've been putting off, even if it has to do with like reorganizing, tidying things up in the way that you're wanting. You're much more likely to feel that the reward of having accomplished whatever it is that you're trying to within your home has much more of a payoff than usual. So the satisfaction of accomplishing something, the pride that you're able to take, and the fact that you have set things up in the way that you like and created much more of the home and family environment that you would like to have, it should just really be very, very rewarding. And this is, much as the issues with family can arise, this seems like a very wonderful, like I was saying, transit to have occurring during the holidays, because this is a period of time where we do tend to look at our homes a little bit more. And we're also very encouraged, of course, by media to kind of judge our homes and whether they're decorated well enough. So this really gives you a lot of energy to that end. But yeah, I think for you, Taurus Rising, that's most of what I wanted to say. So I hope this is quite helpful, and definitely try not to argue with family members during this period of time. So for Gemini Rising, this is moving into your third house with Mars and Leo. And this is going to amplify your ability to speak with confidence. It may even specifically amplify your voice. It can also cause you to take a lot more pride in what you say and what you express to others in your own part of conversation or your own contribution to discourse. This can also bring a flair for drama and expression with regard to your speaking. So you may find that you're much more animated in your expression. One thing I would warn about a little bit is it can bring some actual drama into your sibling or peer or neighbor kind of relationships. So that's something to watch out for a little bit, especially with regard to gossip. It can definitely bring that in. So just something to kind of keep in mind, that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for that. And whether or not you want to engage with that is a very different question. So you should be taking the lead in conversations during this period of time and feeling that that is coming quite naturally to you. You may also find that kind of along the same lines as drama potentially coming up with regard to your peers and friends, siblings, your neighbors, people like this, even just like the people that you encounter at the grocery store or whatnot. People can also be a little bit more aggressive, not just dramatic. So that is something to keep in mind, that you may just kind of run into people who are being a little bit more self-serving than usual. So just something to kind of keep in mind there. You should also be feeling much more driven to connect with others during this period of time, wanting to feel the company of others, a desire to kind of exchange with others. So this can be helpful during the holiday season to make that a little bit more of a motivating factor for you to want to connect and exchange with other people. But definitely avoid heated discussions. Definitely try to avoid impatience with the people who are around you, because that can be something that can come up. And again, this isn't just on your part. This is also something that you can encounter. So do try and keep that in mind, that others may be a little bit less patient. Additionally, this can kind of infuse itself as a transit to learning. So any sort of learning that you may be doing, if you're, say, getting into a new topic or something like this, you may find yourself just really, really motivated to learn everything that you possibly can about it quite quickly, and to also really want to share that with others. So if you have been kind of putting off any sort of study or engagement with any sort of new material, even just delving deeper into any sort of topic, this would be a really wonderful time to engage with that, because you're much more likely to be driven and enthusiastic toward it, where it's something that is actually quite fun and feels more like play than work to do that learning. Other than that, this is Mars. So we have to keep in mind that this is a malefic planet, even though it is in Leo and it definitely doesn't mind being there. It's double fire. It's in your third house of transportation. So be very careful about any sort of traffic accidents or anything like this. So you could also find yourself kind of injured along these lines. Mars can do this. It can cause wrecks and accidents and things like this. So be very careful with your body, with your voice, and with your transportation during this period of time as well. Also, try to be quite more patient with technology, because technology both will feel more like it will be more annoying, like you're going to run into some issues with technology during this time, and you're going to have less patience with it. So try and work on that patience, and try not to get like too irritable if your technology is acting up. You may even have a weird thing come up with a vehicle, and try not to take it too seriously or to get too upset about it, because it may be something that isn't quite as annoying as it seems. It may be even something that kind of passes as Mars moves out of Leo. But I think that is most of what I have for you, Gemini Rising. So for Cancer Rising, we have this Mars and Leo taking place in your second house of finance and personal resources. So it's going to energize you within that area, energize you with regard to your finances, and encourage you to focus on resources during this period of time. So you're going to be motivated to earn more, but we do need to keep in mind that Mars is a malefic. It's in a place that it doesn't really mind to be. So it's going to bring a lot of energy to you toward that end, which is very helpful, but it can also cause things to be a little bit frustrating. So you may feel like, oh man, I'm not earning as much as I want throughout this period of time. But do try and keep in mind the relativism with regard to that. So consider whether your standards around that change during this period of time, because it could be a little bit frustrating for little reason, where you know that you're fine and you weren't really worried about it, say last month, but it could come up as like, no, I really want to be earning more like right now. You may still be completely fine and yet still feel frustrated around it. So again, just kind of something to keep in mind as to what is the nature of the energy that you are focusing in on your finances right now, and try to make sure that that's much more productive than it is frustrating. Additionally, this can lead to a level of an impulse to spend. With Mars in Leo, this can focus in on luxury items, things that enhance your image, things that enhance your pride. So again, try to maintain a level of balance with that. Don't deny yourself too much if that's something that's really going to bring you joy, but try not to overdo it, because Mars and Leo can definitely overdo it. So generally speaking, just kind of be mindful of your financial decisions because of the fact that you're going to be a little bit more impulsive than usual. And not just with regard to spending, but kind of across the board with regard to anything attached to your income, with regard to any sort of loans that you would possibly take on. Just try to make sure that you're thinking that through for a little while. And perhaps most importantly, do try to align your finances with your personal values and self-worth. So try not to do any sort of retail therapy if you are feeling a little bit frustrated one day because you're feeling a sense of like loss of pride with regard to yourself and how you feel about yourself, because this is the second house. That sense of security with Leo here can be built upon whether we feel that we're getting the recognition that we're wanting, and little bruises to the ego that may pass can encourage you to engage in something like retail therapy, where you're buying something to kind of make yourself feel a little bit better and feel a little bit more secure in that moment. So try and think a little bit long term when it comes to that. Is what you're investing in really aligned with your personal values and self-worth longer term? And try not to make up for any sort of self-worth questions that may arise temporarily with purchases that aren't really necessary, but maybe somewhat annoying to undo. Additionally, there could be little surprise bills and things that arise. So just try and keep that in mind. It shouldn't be too bad. Again, Mars doesn't necessarily mind being in Leo, but it can cause things to be a little bit bigger of a deal than one would think. So this could even just be a utility bill that is higher than expected. So to the full extent to which you're able to save for any sort of rainy day, I would definitely be making sure that you're just as focused on that as you are with any sort of impulse during this period of time. But otherwise, certainly in terms of a period of time that centers around a lot of gift giving and things like this should be a pretty decent transit for you. And it's definitely going to be motivating you to earn more. So hopefully that additionally translates into your own personal ambition and the pride that you take in your work and so on. So I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Cancer Rising. Okay, so for Leo Rising, this Mars and Leo transit is, of course, happening in your first house. So this Mars is coming most directly into your own personality, as well as what's approaching you. So throughout this time, you can definitely expect to be a lot more assertive and bold, and to have a very strong desire to express yourself. This is going to feel like a great inspiration or motivation for you to go after what it is that you want, to become what it is that you want to be, and to really embrace your own personality and the mark that you make personally. So you should be feeling a lot more physical energy and general energy and motivation, as well as a lot more confidence and charisma. So you should be coming across as really very, very strong during this period of time. So that'll be something to kind of keep in mind, that you will be definitely coming across with Mars in Leo energy just right up front with people. So definitely consider how that comes across. Certainly don't edit yourself too much, of course, but do understand that you're going to be standing out a lot during this time. So any sort of passions that are stirring in you, any sort of like mood that you're in, is going to be really on the surface. So people may react to that. Additionally, people in general, because of the fact that Mars will simply be in your first house, people may approach you more aggressively or in a way that is more self-serving than usual. So this is something also to keep in mind, that people may just say things to you that are just a lot more aggressive than usual. This is something that comes up for me, certainly, every time I have Mars in my transiting my first house, and is generally something that people tend to experience with that transit. So something to keep in mind, that it's not just that like everyone's lost their mind suddenly. It's a transit that you're going through. So just try and keep that in mind, and don't worry too much. Again, like I was kind of alluding to a moment ago, where you're coming off a lot more strong than usual. Try not to convince yourself that because people are being more aggressive with you, that you shouldn't do that. Just try to be aware of how you're coming across, and then just understand that this transit's going on. And so it's naturally going to make people a little bit more aggressive when they're approaching you. And that maybe those things aren't entirely connected, but to the extent that they are and you have some control over it, maybe consider taking some of the edges off of that a bit. Now, this can also definitely encourage some risk taking behavior on your part. Mars in Leo is really going to want to stand out as doing things that are brave and daring and courageous. So this may be something that really takes hold for you throughout this period of time. Definitely try to be careful with your body whenever you have Mars transiting your first house. Your own personal physical energy is also going to be quite strong. So again, it's your first house. It's Mars. It's considered a malefic planet. It's not so bad when it's in Leo. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but it can lead to personal injury. It can also lead to overexertion when Mars is in your first house. So just kind of something to keep in mind, that with the risk-taking energy, with the extra physical energy that you're going to be having, try not to overdo it. Just try and keep it in balance. Try not to take too big of risks when it comes to your physical body. But otherwise, this would be a really excellent time if you want to start a fitness regimen, or if you want to work on any aspect of yourself where it would be something that you would then take pride in, especially if it has anything to do with your image. This would be a really wonderful time to do that, because the pride and confidence that comes from that is going to be a much more potent reward for you, to motivate you to continue with that momentum throughout this period of time. So it would be great to get a routine down throughout this period of time based on the rewards that you're getting now, and then already have that established as a habit by the time this transit moves on. And that is also the case for any sort of personal goals. So again, and anything that has to do with you and your own personal expression and what you are wanting out of life, the way that you are wanting to come off, this is a really, really wonderful time for you to proactively pursue all of these things, because again, it's the reward function here. It's much more potent, and so it's much more likely to stick. But yeah, this should be quite a pleasant transit for you. Again, Mars in the first, it's not always necessarily our favorite, just because people can be a little bit aggro when it comes to that. But for a Leo rising, this should be pretty good. And it's just going to increase a lot of the things that you already value, like your physical energy, your self-image, your own boldness, your own courageousness, your own ability to stand out. These things that are important to you, it's energizing all of that. So it should be a pretty good time. Again, this is going to be for 2 months off the bat, and then it'll go back into Cancer for a little while, into your 12th house, and that energy will seep back a bit as it moves back into your 12th house, but that'll be just for several months, and then it'll move back into your first house again next year. So definitely take advantage of this transit while you've got it, because I personally, for one, am very excited about the fact that we're getting some Leo energy into this Mars. So certainly you should be looking forward to this period of time. But that is what I have for you, Leo Rising. So for Virgo Rising, this transit is taking place in your 12th house. And this house has a lot to do with things that are hidden, things that are subconscious. It has to do with spirituality, things that are just kind of beyond the veil, things that we might not be completely aware of. And so for you, this can come up as hidden desires or desires that you're not quite aware that you may have. And if you sense those things coming up in your subconscious, I would try not to ignore them too much. It'll be easy to ignore them. But with Mars and Leo there in your 12th, it would probably actually be better to really actively pursue that and to try really hard to understand whatever that is and where it's coming from, especially if it has anything to do with ego concerns, because Mars and Leo is really going to amplify that. And so you should be able to work through those things in a very potent and substantial way throughout this period of time. So self-reflection along those lines, anything that comes up, which is a hidden desire or something that has been suppressed, especially with regard to anger or any sort of negative feelings, particularly when it comes to you, how you're perceived, how you feel your life has gone, reflecting on that whenever it comes up in the subconscious to some extent, and really trying hard to work through all of the ego concerns along those lines will be the most healthy and opportunity ripe way to utilize this Mars and Leo transit for you. So confronting those inner blocks, confronting any subconscious patterns, the ways that you feel about yourself, this is just going to be so important throughout this period of time to be as consciously aware of that and as proactive about that as you can be in order to get the best out of this transit. This can also bring a major increased focus on spirituality. So this is also likely to be quite individual. So not necessarily in terms of any sort of organized way, but just how you deeply feel about spirituality, how it affects you, how you feel about it, what aspects of it you like, what aspects of it feel a little bit uncomfortable for you or like it doesn't quite fit you. That'll be really important. And then you should have a lot of energy and motivation to pursue those aspects of spirituality which do really feel right for you. So I would also really recommend actively pursuing that throughout this period of time, because that also gives the transit a way to express which is much more accessible to you and less along the lines of things that are hidden or suppressed or a blockage or subconscious. Spirituality is something that we can, of course, actively engage with. So it would be really good to utilize this transit to engage with that in order to give the energy expression in your own life. Now, additionally, one thing that I personally notice with Mars in the 12th house transit is there can be a decrease of your own aggressive energies, and where you might just not really see aggression or anger really arising too terribly strongly. Of course, if it's suppressed, then it's much more likely to come to the fore. So try not to ignore it if it arises, but these can be relatively peaceful times because Mars is always going to be somewhere in your chart, but when it's in the 12th house, it is a lot less active. So it can represent to some extent a decrease in that Mars energy in your life, generally speaking, which can make things a lot more harmonious and pleasant and just like things are kind of smoothly moving along. You may not see a lot of necessarily achievement, so to say, or it may feel like things aren't really moving a whole lot throughout this period of time. I would try your best to embrace that as much as you can, because this just isn't quite the time for it. Additionally, you may find yourself feeling a lot more introverted than usual throughout this period of time. So again, that's something that I would really embrace. If you want to focus a lot of the energy that you usually do to extroverting into spiritual concerns, into delving into your own subconscious, things like this, even just spending time by yourself, taking care of yourself, that would be a really wonderful way to experience that alone time that Mars, especially Mars and Leo, can definitely have when it's transiting our 12th house. So try not to feel lonely. If that's something that comes up for you, during this period of time, do try and sweep that aside, because it's not that you're alone, so to say. It's just that you're being held for now. You're just kind of being held out of that social environment for now in order to work on some personal things, so that later next year, when Mars winds up moving into your first house, you're much more sure of yourself. You're less wrapped up in whatever was going on, things like this. So the healthiest way to experience this is to just focus on spirituality. Definitely look at and go into any sort of frustrations or angers or desires, especially if you can find some sort of ego basis to them. Analyze those things, put a little bit of energy into that, and then also taking care of yourself. So self-care, self-love, all of these things, really pampering yourself throughout this period of time would be an absolutely wonderful way to express this. But yeah, so that is what I have for you, Virgo Rising, for this Mars in Leo transit. So for Libra Rising, this transit is taking place in your 11th house of society, groups, colleagues, that which is supportive of your career and personal ambitions, your worldly ambitions. This house is also associated with friends, ideals, hopes. So with this energy coming into your 11th, there's a much heightened focus on your social life and group activities. So you should definitely be expecting more invitations along those lines, more engagement along those lines. And these things may come in pretty suddenly, pretty quickly. Mars does tend to act quite quickly. So increased spontaneity during this time as something that you will be experiencing from the outside, but additionally is something to embrace and even to encourage in others. Because if you were encouraging this kind of Mars and Leo energy, people have that in them. And if they're not, throughout this period of time, because of this transit. And so if you are encouraging that in them, then there should be a much more comfortable flow within those groups and with your friends and so forth, because you're going to be tapping into something that they're feeling, but they might not have it taking place in their 11th house. So they might not be, for instance, suggesting that to groups of people, even though it's something that they might enjoy to experience together with others. So, if you want to set up a date night for friends or colleagues or whatever, just go out and have fun. That would be a really great way to experience this. And it could bring in an interesting, though not perfect, I'll give you a little caution in a second, opportunity with regard to your career. That could definitely come through with this. So keeping the charisma and the charm up is definitely advised here, but we are dealing with Mars. So Mars is considered a malefic planet. It's not so bad when it's in Leo. The worst case where this would come out would be along the lines of people who are a little maybe self-absorbed or self-serving. But otherwise, Mars through the 11th house transits can, generally speaking, play out as things also being a little bit complicated and there being more than you would like to see in this specific area. So for instance, with networking, you could run into people and meet people who are a little bit more aggressive than usual. And you could also find that the people that you're networking with are a little bit more self-serving, and so it's not quite as beneficial as you would necessarily like. But it certainly wouldn't be harmful, I don't think, to do that networking, to build up that social circle, so to say, during this period of time. And then as the transit moves on and you're no longer dealing with Mars, then to tap into those connections further. This can also definitely encourage you to seek recognition within your colleague group and your friend group. So taking a lot of pride in your contributions to groups and definitely wanting some recognition for that. And any sort of recognition that could come from those groups would be a very strong motivating factor for you throughout this period of time too. Additionally, this feeds a lot of passion into your goals and ideals. So the things that you want, generally speaking, for yourself in terms of your public standing, your ambitions, and so forth, you're much, much more passionate about that, and you have a lot more energy to those ends. So if there are any benchmarks that you're trying to hit, if there's anything where you've just felt a little bit unmotivated, this would be a really wonderful period of time to proactively go after those things. So make a plan to actively pursue those goals and even to pursue ideals. So with the 11th house here, this can also have to do with social activity for good. So any sort of causes that you are concerned with, if you were to engage in groups to those ends, engaging with any causes, this would be something that would motivate you a great deal and would give you a lot of pride as well. So that would be a really wonderful way to utilize this Mars and Leo in your 11th house transit as well. But do keep in mind, again, just as much as there can be aggression in groups, there can be also drama and just personal, interpersonal conflict that you wind up finding yourself confronted with. And it could be focused toward you, but it could also just be that it's happening around you. And with that being the case, again, this is Mars. So we don't want to tap into any of the negative aspects of it because it is a malefic and it can get really out of balance, especially when it's in Leo. So if there's any sort of conflict, drama, gossip, whatever that comes up within groups, I would try to really avoid that because it's not likely to go well for you since you have this in your 11th house. That's more likely to play out as a malefic Mars transit then. So disengaging from that to the extent that you possibly can would be very strongly advised with this transit as well. But otherwise, this should just be a really energizing, pretty excellent transit for you. It's really going to ramp up your motivation level and also the enjoyment of socializing, of spontaneous action, of group activities, of being with other people. But yeah, I think that that is pretty much what I have for you, Libra Rising. So for Scorpio Rising, this transit is taking place in your 10th house of career and ambitions and your personal vision of your life direction. It's also a very, very visible house. So what happens in the 10th house generally is quite visible to other people. This house is also associated with authority and leadership. So you're likely to experience very heightened ambition and desire specifically for recognition within your career and all of those kind of aspects of life that are somewhat career adjacent that I just mentioned, and be much more motivated to that end. So also motivated by recognition. And of course, that doesn't have to be a bad thing if it's causing you to be more proactive toward your goals. Then leaning into that motivation through recognition, I think is very strongly advised when you have Mars in Leo transiting through your 10th house. This is going to push you really strongly to achieve greater success. So you're just going to be really overwhelmingly motivated to go after what it is that you want in terms of your own success, in terms of leadership roles, the next rung in the ladder for many people. And for others, if you feel like you are in a field that you don't love and there's something else that you're really wanting to do, this can really give you the energy to go after it. Even if you are burning the midnight oil, so to say, to achieve something, this is a period of time where you would definitely have the energy to do that, as well as the motivation. Now, this can also bring leadership roles, but one thing that will be quite important is to avoid being domineering. Like I said, this is a very visible house, so it's very unlikely that any of that is going to go unseen. So try to exercise any authority that you have at your disposal in a very clean and healthy way with regard to others in order to maximize the level of recognition that comes from this and the energy and motivation and so forth, and then minimize the more negative aspects of it that could come through where people could see you as difficult or challenging as a person, because this is a Mars transit and Mars is a malefic. So it doesn't always play out in the greatest ways if we feed into the more negative aspects of it. So if you're coming off domineering, that can cause people to question whether you should be in a leadership role during this period of time. So definitely being soft with your exercise of authority is highly recommended because of the fact that your actions draw attention. So definitely, again, yeah, be mindful of how you want to be perceived, and then do that. Make sure that your action is in alignment with how you're wanting to be perceived, because you're much more visible when Mars is in this house. And then, yeah, just generally speaking, greater energy in your career, a lot more physical, mental, motivated energy to do your work, do it well, get recognized for it, achieve greater success, and so forth. Now, I do also want to point out, along the lines of the kind of potential malefic aspect of this, is that it's not just you that could be domineering. It's also those in leadership roles who could come off as domineering toward you. So just try to prepare yourself for that as much as possible, so that hopefully you don't react too strongly to it. But just kind of be aware that people may be a little bit more aggressive within the context of your career life and your ambitions and all of the people that you encounter along those lines and along that path just during this period of time, during this transit. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio Rising. Okay, so for Sagittarius Rising, this transit is occurring in your ninth house. The ninth house is associated with travel, with philosophy, with higher learning, with ideology and belief. So this is very likely to encourage exploration across the board. So mental, spiritual, philosophical, or physical in nature, whether you are learning about a new topic or delving deeper into another topic, whether you're traveling. This is going to be bringing a lot of energy and motivation for all of those pursuits, especially with regard to any sort of activities that broaden your horizon. So again, any sort of learning and topics of interest is definitely favored by this transit, but it'll be an interesting kind of balancing act between broadening your horizons, but also wanting to focus on areas where you personally feel really deeply interested and engaged. So not necessarily just any topic, but certainly anything that deeply interests you. You're going to have a lot of energy and motivation to dig into that quite strongly. Also, any sort of adventures that arise, whether it's traveling or whether it's just any sort of activity that makes you feel more engaged with life, that gives you that kind of zeal that seems a bit out of the ordinary. Now, I should say this is a Mars transit and it's to your ninth house. So if you're traveling, definitely be physically careful, because Mars transits can bring injury and accidents. So any sort of transportation, but especially any sort of travel that's a little bit out of the ordinary for you, or if you're engaging in any sort of physical activities that are, again, a little bit out of the ordinary. So if you're going hiking or climbing or whatever, just be extra careful with this because of the fact that it can bring weird little accidents. And you're also a Sagittarius rising. So Sagittarius rising can be a little bit physically clumsy. Do try and be careful with your body with regard to any of that. Additionally, within the context of any of those kinds of activities, you could run across people who are a little bit more aggressive than you're expecting. So that is something to kind of keep in mind, is that it does bring that Mars archetype into that house and into those areas of your life. So you're most likely to encounter aggressive people with regard to that. And that can be around beliefs as well. So this could be philosophical arguments is one thing that can play out with Mars in the ninth house. So definitely try to avoid being too forceful with your own beliefs, but you may encounter people who are very forceful with their beliefs. So try not to feed into that, and maybe try to avoid people who are behaving that way with regard to their own beliefs, because then they are playing into the negative side of that Mars archetype. And you don't really want to feed into or create more of that energy for yourself. So, certainly through the whole holiday season, if you are getting together with family or whatnot, I would try to avoid arguing over beliefs, worldviews, philosophies, things like that as well. But yeah, I would definitely recommend with this transit to focus on study, focus on broadening your horizons. And again, if there are any travel or adventure opportunities that arise for you, you're going to have a lot of energy for it. And it's going to feel like, generally speaking, just very enjoyable and fulfilling. So I would, yeah, definitely recommend going along with any of those opportunities that arise for you and even creating them. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Sagittarius Rising. So for Capricorn Rising, this transit of Mars and Leo is taking place in your eighth house of shared resources, of commitments, intimacy, business, things along these lines. So a much increased focus on shared resources, and definitely avoid power plays. And I don't just mean with regard to yourself, but I do mean that. So avoid power plays yourself, but also watch out a little bit for power plays from other people, because a Mars transit is technically, it is a malefic. So you can run into some negative aspects of where something is playing out. And for that to be playing out in your eighth house, it can bring in some aggressive behavior or controlling behavior with regard to people with whom you share resources. So just something to kind of keep in mind. Additionally, manipulative people could come into play. So if you encounter anything that seems like that, I would just try and take a step back and then try to avoid that throughout the period of time of this transit, because I don't want to say Mars can bring harm, but that's literally the case. So I would try to just generally avoid anything that looks like it could go that way. Now, this is also likely to bring up a strong desire for change, for self empowerment, for feeling like you're more in control of your own life, and a lot of motivation, and again, a lot of energy to that end. So, that would be a really excellent area to focus in on throughout this period of time, too. You could definitely uncover some things that have been hidden or have been kind of under the surface that you weren't quite sure of. So I would definitely not be surprised if something like that arises. Additionally, because this is a finance related house, try to avoid any sort of impulsive decisions with regard to your finances, including getting into a loan. Generally speaking, you're going to want to avoid getting involved with a loan as long as Mars is in your eighth house. That's just not great. It's unlikely to go as well as it could when Mars was in some other house that was unrelated to the loan. So I definitely wouldn't recommend signing any contracts, especially when it comes to loans throughout this period of time, too. But one of the best ways that you could express and activate and engage with this transit is to study psychology of the self and ego. So Leo has a lot to do with those energies of the self and of ego and all of these kinds of concerns. And so delving into that aspect of psychology, psychology is also ruled by the eighth house. You would have a lot of energy and motivation to that end, but it would also just be a really excellent way to utilize the full expression of this transit archetypally, so that it's much less likely to come up in any sort of negative way. So for instance, if you were studying psychology of the self and ego, then if you encounter manipulative people, it's much more likely that you're going to see it right away and then not experience any sort of the negative sides of that. Additionally, delving into any sort of spiritual or even occult topics could be quite interesting throughout this period of time. I wouldn't dabble in anything that could go negative. And just because, again, this is a Mars transit to this house, but again, you should have a lot of energy and motivation to that end. So if that's something that you're interested in getting into, then I would focus on studying it, probably not really like dabbling in anything, so to say. And any sort of yogic practices, body healing practices, things along those lines, it would be good to get more involved in that if that's of any sort of interest to you. But yeah, other than that, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Capricorn Rising. So for Aquarius Rising, this transit is taking place in your seventh house of relationships, partnerships, sometimes legal areas, but generally speaking, it's the house of other people and your connection to them. So this tends to intensify relationships. You could have issues arise in a relationship when you have Mars transiting your seventh house, and working through it can be a bit of a challenge, but it also opens things up to be able to be addressed. So if something arises, do just understand that this transit's going on. I would avoid any sort of aggression or acting out of any like negative emotions within relationships, but actively addressing concerns would be a really good way to utilize this transit as well. Additionally, within the context of a committed partnership, there's likely to be more passion there, but also potentially confrontation. So similarly, along the lines of intensifying your relationships, generally speaking, certainly within the context of a committed partnership, that's something that's very likely to come up, and that could certainly feature some major like ego concerns within the context of the relationship. So I would watch out for that to an extent. Again, try not to be too aggressive, but also be wary of aggressiveness on the part of others. Try to make sure that things are being dealt with in a logical, practical manner. And definitely try to make sure that you're engaging in win-win connections where there aren't any sort of power plays here, because Mars and Leo in the seventh could definitely engage in power games and things like this. And that's something that you'll definitely want to avoid during this period of time. Now, if you are single, or even if otherwise, you could definitely be attracting kind of fiery or dynamic people as well. And this wouldn't just have to be romantically, this could just be in general. One way that this can play out as well is similar to a Mars to the first house transit. It can bring in people who are somewhat aggressive. So that's something to keep in mind. If that kind of happens a little bit more than usual during this period of time, I would chalk it up to that transit. I wouldn't worry about it too much long term. It's probably not something that you're doing. It's probably just something that you are kind of subconsciously attracting because of this transit. So yeah, balancing assertiveness with diplomacy, creating those win-win connections is really the best way that you can avoid the worst aspects of this, and then playing into any sort of passion and intimacy and greater interest and more dynamism within your relationships is one of the ways that you can lean into the more positive aspects of this. Also, just sharing like warmth and caring with people. Leo is a very warm sign when it comes to connection. So pretty sentimental, wanting to nurture, wanting to take care of people, wanting to take pride in that as well. So if those energies arise with you, it would be something really great to infuse into your relationships during this period of time as well. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Aquarius Rising. So for Pisces Rising, this transit is occurring in your sixth house of daily tasks, routines, work, skills, your craft. So you should be feeling very motivated to work harder, to achieve excellence, to do just really great work that you can take a lot of pride in. Your work ethic should be really on point. And again, not just feeling motivated, but feeling energetic to that end. So probably feeling less like work is daunting and more like work is a fun challenge. And that energy is also going to come into the context of tasks in your daily life. So even just things that you do around the home, your errands, whatnot, just the whole daily routine is likely to motivate you a lot more to be able to check things off of your list, so to say. But additionally, you should have a lot more energy to that end. So this would also be a really great time for a new health regimen. This is also the house of health. So with Mars and Leo here, again, this is a high energy transit. The fact that you have that increased energy level, but then are also motivated by the rewards of pride and accomplishment and being able to pat yourself on the back, this would be a really great time to start something like that so that you're able to create that habit and create that routine for when this transit moves on. This can also bring in leadership roles within the context of your work. Definitely try not to be domineering in any sort of an authority role, but I will also say that there could be domineering people or conflictual people that you could encounter within your work. So that is something to keep in mind, that if that's something that you experience more during this period of time, I would definitely chalk that up to this transit. And I wouldn't worry about that becoming a long-term thing. It's just something that'll be annoying for the time being. But yeah, overall, determination in projects, just really being super motivated to get things done, to do great work, and to take pride in that work, especially at the end of the day, being able to look back and say, look, this was a really productive day and I'm feeling pretty awesome about that. And that's also likely to then feed into a sense of momentum with your energy and with your daily tasks. But yeah, so I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Pisces Rising, and that is what I have for everyone. So thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And again, if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, that helps out so much the channel. It helps it to grow because then it feeds the algorithm and it tells the algorithm that more people will be interested in this video and it gets spread around more. And do please consider subscribing if you are new here and you enjoy content like this. I would love to have you here for future videos. And yeah, other than that, I hope that this is a wonderful transit for everyone and I will see you soon. Be good. Bye.